Welcome to Caledonia Sleeps, your peaceful escape into the heart of Scotland. If these stories bring you comfort, a like and a subscribe means the world, and it helps more people find their way to the fireside. Drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're listening from tonight, and if you have Scottish heritage or a family connection to any of the traditions we explore, I'd love to hear about that too. I read every single one. So settle in, pull the covers a little closer, let the room grow still around you. There is something about Easter that belongs to the early morning, to that hour before the household stirs, when the sky is still dark but beginning to change at the edges, and the air is cold and absolutely still, and the world feels poised on the edge of something. The old Scots knew that feeling well. They rose before dawn for it. They climbed hills for it. They stood in the cold and waited for the light. You do not have to climb any hills tonight. Just let the story find you here by the warmth. Tonight, we're going somewhere most people never think to look when they think of Easter. Not to the chocolate eggs and the Easter bunny, but back to the hillsides of old Scotland, where children carried bright dyed eggs to grassy slopes at dawn, when kitchens smelled of gorse and onion skins and fresh baking, and where the morning itself felt like an event the whole land had been waiting for. So let's begin. Easter in Scotland had a complicated history. After the Reformation in 1560, the Presbyterian Kirk officially discouraged it. The old Catholic calendar had been crowded with saints' days and festivals, and the Reformers cleared it back to a single holy day, Sunday. Christmas, Easter, all the old feasts were viewed with deep suspicion. The Kirk session records, those remarkable parish court documents that tracked the moral life of Scottish communities from the 16th century onward, show elders reprimanding parishioners for all manner of folk observance, for dancing, for guising, for marking the old festivals in ways the new Kirk disapproved of. The message from the pulpit was plain. These things were remnants of popish superstition, and they were to stop. But they did not stop. In the Highlands, where the Kirk's reach was less immediate, in the Catholic communities of the outer Hebrides, where the old calendar had never truly been surrendered, and in quiet domestic ritual everywhere, handed from grandmother to grandchild in the language of practice rather than proclamation. Here is how we dye the eggs. Here is the rhythm you say when you roll them down the hill. Whatever the Kirk said, the land kept its own calendar. In the Christian tradition that shaped Scotland's Easter from its earliest days, fire was central. The Easter Vigil, that ancient nighttime service held after sunset on Holy Saturday, the evening before Easter Sunday, begins in darkness. The congregation gathers outside in the cold, and a new fire is kindled from scratch. From that single flame, a great candle is lit, the Paschal candle, and carried in procession into the darkened church. Its flame passed from candle to candle through the gathered people until the whole building glows. The words sung at that moment, in Latin, in the old Catholic rite, are among the oldest in the Christian liturgy. Lumen Christi, the light of Christ. In the Catholic communities of the Outer Hebrides and the Highland West, where the old faith had never been set aside, the ceremony was the very heart of Easter. The new fire blessed outside the church, the darkened nave filling with light, candle by candle, face by face. The community awake together through the sacred hours of Holy Saturday night, waiting for the moment that everything turned. And then, as the vigil ended and the grey dawn came in, some communities carried the light home, literally. Children ran back across the macher with flame cupped in their hands, shielded from the wind. The hearth was rekindled from the new fire, the old year's flame put out, the new year's flame beginning. It was a gesture of immense symbolic weight. The fire in the home was the same fire as the fire in the church, which was the same fire as the light of Easter morning itself. In Edinburgh, a different but kindred tradition endures to this day. Before dawn on Easter Sunday, congregations climb Arthur's Seat, that great volcanic hill rising from the city's heart, to watch the sun rise over the horizon. Greyfriars Kirk has held this dawn service for many years, the congregation ascending in the dark, gathering in the cold, faces turned east. The older the impulse, the simpler the theology. You wait in the dark, you watch for the light, and when it comes, you greet it. To rise before dawn, to climb in darkness, to wait in cold silence, and then to see the light come, that is not nothing, that is, in its way, everything. The sky is light, the world is slowly warming, and it is time for one of the most characteristically Scottish of all Easter customs, the paiss egg. The word paiss is thought to derive from Pâques, the French word for Easter, which itself traces back through Latin to the Hebrew Pesach, Passover. So in the very name of this humble decorated egg, we carry the layers of history, ancient Jewish tradition, Christian observance, and the folk practices of Britain woven together in a single word, spoken by a child rolling an egg down a grassy slope. Paiss egging, the dyeing, decorating and rolling of eggs, is recorded across the whole of Scotland, from Shetland in the far north to the borders in the south. The tradition was so widespread that the day itself varied from place to place. In some communities, the eggs were rolled on Holy Saturday. in others on Easter Sunday, in others on Easter Monday. What stayed the same, wherever you were, was the hill. The hills used for rolling were called paiss-braes, the rolling hills, and the activity of rolling eggs on them was woven into the fabric of the season. The making of a paiss egg was itself a craft and a ritual. The eggs, real ones, hard-boiled, were decorated using the simplest and most beautiful of natural materials. Onion skins, gathered and saved through the weeks before Easter, were wrapped tightly around each egg, and when the egg was boiled in a pan with those skins, the result was a warm, mottled golden brown, as rich and varied as old wood grain. Red onion skins gave a pinkish tone, gorse flowers, the whin, the bright yellow blaze of spring gorse that covers the hillsides and roadsides of Scotland from March onward, produced a pale lemon yellow, a colour like trapped sunlight. Lichen gave deep ambers, spinach could lend soft green, beetroot red. In a household in Annan in the Scottish borders in the early 20th century, a grandmother showed her grandchildren how it was done. Skins from brown onions and gorse picked that morning from the hill above the town, tucked against the shells and boiled together. The going to pick the gorse was itself part of the celebration, getting one's hands into the spring landscape, coming back with scratched fingers and a bundle of flowers that smelled of coconut and sunshine. The finished eggs were things of great beauty in their simplicity. No two were alike, because the wrapping of the skins was never exact, and the dye spread differently across each shell. You might hold one up to the light and see the variations in colour across its surface, darker here, paler there, a faint texture where a leaf had been pressed against it before boiling. Some families would inscribe names or dates on the egg with a wax candle before dyeing. The wax resisted the dye, leaving a pale mark against the colour. An egg might bear a child's name. It might carry the year. It was a small, fragile, edible document of the moment. There was also the superstition, widely noted in British folklore, that empty eggshells must be crushed after the contents are eaten, or they will be used as boats by witches. This belief, recorded across the north of England and Scotland, tells us something about the egg's symbolic weight. It was not merely food, it was a vessel with power, and that power needed to be properly concluded. The rolling itself took place on grassy slopes, the paiss-braes, and it was a community affair. Almost everyone came out, the hill filled with families, with clusters of children negotiating whose egg was whose, with the sound of laughter and the occasional cry of dismay as an egg broke before it reached the bottom. The competition was simple. Whose egg could roll the furthest without cracking? But that simplicity contained something more. The rolling of the egg down the hill carried in the understanding of those who did it echoes of two meanings at once. In the older pre-Christian understanding, the rolling sphere echoed the movement of the sun. The egg is a solar disk, sent tumbling down the hill as the sun tumbled up the sky. And in the Christian understanding that had layered itself over that older image, the rolling egg recalled the stone rolled away from the tomb, the great opening, the first morning, the moment when death was undone. Both meanings could be held in the same gesture, and in the folk practice of Scotland they usually were. The rolling of the egg was not theology. It was joy and gesture and tradition, and the pleasure of a spring morning on a grassy hillside with people you loved. In Edinburgh, the paiss-braes of choice was Arthur's Seat, that great volcanic hill rising from the city's heart, where the egg-rolling tradition endures to this day. Families climb in the morning. The children carry their bright-dyed eggs and send them bumping and rolling down the long grassy slopes toward Holyrood. It is among the most cherished and enduring of the city's Easter customs. But Arthur's Seat was only the most famous of the hills. Across Aberdeenshire, in Perthshire, on the links and coastal slopes of Fife, in the hilly farmland of the borders, wherever there was a suitable incline, there were paiss eggs and children to roll them. The only requirements were a hill of the right gradient, not so steep the egg shattered immediately, not so shallow it barely moved, and a fine enough morning to be outdoors. And even if the morning was not quite fine, Scots went anyway, because some things are worth a little cold. After the rolling, the eggs were eaten. This mattered too. The egg that had been a symbol, that had been rolled and admired and competed over, became food, absorbed into the body, made part of the person. The eating of paiss eggs on Easter morning was as common as the rolling of them, and it completed the rite. Decoration, competition, consumption. The egg made beautiful, set free, received. For the children of old Scotland, Easter was the great egg festival of the year, and the egg was not only for rolling down hills, it was for collecting, for competing with, for gifting, and for games that filled the Easter weekend from one end to the other. The collecting of eggs began even before Easter Sunday itself, in a custom recorded across Scotland and the north of England. Children would go door to door in the days before Easter, knocking and singing rhymes in exchange for paiss eggs. This tradition was closely related to the paiss egg custom of northern England, where groups of fantastically dressed young men, the paiss eggers, processed through villages singing the traditional paiss egging song and collecting eggs and money as tribute. In Scotland, the practice was simpler and more domestic. Children, not elaborate mummers, going from neighbour to neighbour, a rhyme in exchange for an egg. The eggs collected this way would be dyed and saved for the rolling on Easter morning, or eaten at the Easter breakfast, the reward of a week's cheerful visiting. Then came the egg dumping game, known variously across Scotland and the north of England. as dumping, jarping, or knocking. The rules were simple and deeply satisfying. You held your hard-boiled paiss egg in your fist, pointed end up. Your opponent did the same. You tapped the pointed ends together, sharp and decisive, once. Whoever's shell cracked first was out. The winner challenged the next opponent, and the next, until one egg alone remained unbroken. The champion egg was a thing of genuine pride. Some families kept them from year to year, the same egg returning to the table the following Easter, a small, slightly desiccated trophy sitting in its honoured place, last year's victor, awaiting the new season's challengers. The gifting of paiss eggs was another thread woven through the Easter weekend. One hard-boiled, dyed egg given to each person who visited the house through the Easter period was a form of hospitality as specific and meaningful as offering tea. You received an egg at one door and carried it to another. The eggs moved through the community like small warm tokens of the season, each one dyed and individual, each one the product of someone's kitchen table and someone's careful wrapping of onion skins. To receive a paiss egg was to receive a piece of someone's Easter morning. To give one was to share your own. And so the children of old Scotland moved through Easter in a world made of eggs. Eggs dyed and rolled and tapped and collected and given and received and finally eaten with salt on a hillside or a kitchen step in the bright, uncertain light of a Scottish spring morning. For most people in old Scotland, the richness of Easter Sunday was inseparable from what they ate. And to understand what Easter food meant, you have to understand what the weeks before it had been like. Lent, the 40 days of fasting and restraint preceding Easter, was observed with varying degrees of strictness across Scotland. In the Catholic communities of the West and the Highlands, it was taken seriously. In the more austere Presbyterian communities of the Central Belt and the East, the Kirk's official discouragement of religious holidays had complicated matters. If Easter was not a special day, then Lent had no official conclusion to work toward, and yet the pattern of the seasons enforced a kind of natural Lent in any case. The stores of the previous autumn were depleted by March. The new crops had not yet come. The livestock were still thin from winter. The hens, who had been barely laying in the cold, short days, were now beginning to lay again. Eggs, which had been scarce and precious, were suddenly plentiful. Part of what made them feel so abundant was precisely that they had been set aside. In Scotland, the eve of Lent was known as Fasting's Eve, Fasting's Eve, the last day of feasting before the long restraint began. Eggs were used up on that day, or collected and carefully stored away. Through the 6 weeks that followed, they accumulated quietly in the cool of the dairy or the back of the larder, saved and counted, not to be eaten until Easter gave permission. By the time Easter morning arrived, a household might have more eggs than it had seen since the autumn. That was the point. The abundance of Easter was built, deliberately, out of the discipline that came before it. This abundance, arriving precisely at Easter, was itself the feast. It was not coincidental. The timing of Easter, movable, always in spring, had always aligned with this moment of returning plenty. The eggs rolling down the hill were not merely symbols. They were the first real abundance of the year, and there were enough of them to now be generous with, to give away, to boil and colour and roll down hills and eat with pleasure. The Easter table in an old Scottish household was simple by later standards, but after the thin weeks of late winter it was opulent. Fresh eggs, boiled and eaten with good salt, new butter, the first churning of the year from cows back on spring grass, pale and sweet, crowdy, the soft fresh cheese of the Highlands and Islands, made from the new milk that came in richer now that the cows were feeding well, and lamb, though the specific timing of lamb needs a small honest note. Scottish lamb in the traditional calendar was not always available at Easter precisely, since lambing typically ran from late February through April, and the young animals were not yet ready for slaughter. The tradition of Easter lamb in Scotland traces more to the Passover tradition, absorbed through Christianity, the Paschal lamb, than to the precise availability of Scottish spring lamb, and some food historians have noted this candidly. But in folk practice, whatever lamb could be had was the Easter meat, and it carried its symbolic weight regardless. Hot cross buns, those sweet, spiced, cross-marked rolls eaten on Good Friday, are associated with Easter across Britain, and Scotland was no exception. Their origin is debated. Some accounts credit a monk at St Albans in the 14th century. Others trace the cross-marked bun back much further. In any case, by the 18th and 19th centuries, they were firmly part of the Easter Friday tradition across Scotland, bought from the baker or made at home, eaten warm with butter. The cross on top was both decorative and meaningful, a reminder of what Friday was before Sunday's brightness made it past. But the hot cross bun was only part of the Good Friday story. In the Scottish Highlands, Good Friday carried its own set of customs that went well beyond food, customs rooted in the particular weight of the day itself. It was widely held, especially in the Highland and Island communities, that no iron implement should be put into the earth on Good Friday. No ploughing, no sowing, no spade broken into the soil. The reason given was deeply felt rather than merely conventional. Iron on this day of all days was the metal of the nails. To drive iron into the ground on the day those same nails were driven into the cross was understood as a kind of repetition of the wound, an act unfitting for a household that knew what the day meant. Farmers who observed this custom might spend Good Friday mending fences, cleaning byres, or setting their tools in order, all the work that kept the farm going without touching iron to the earth. The fields would wait. Friday was not their day. And the table on Good Friday was deliberately plain, not the emptiness of poverty, but the deliberate plainness of a fast, a chosen quiet before the Sunday abundance. In the coastal communities and the islands, where herring had been the staff of life for generations, Good Friday meant salt herring and tatties. The dish is almost laughably simple. Salt cured herring, the silver darlings of the Scottish sea, boiled alongside floury potatoes and served on a plain dish. The sharpness of the salt fish against the soft blandness of the potato. In the Highlands and Islands, this pairing was not considered deprivation. It was sustenance, clean and honest, the food of the working shore, eaten with gratitude on a day that called for something stripped back to its essentials. There is a particular quality to salt herring eaten from a plain dish on a grey spring morning. The smell of it fills the kitchen, salt and sea and smoke all at once, the smell of the coast itself. The potatoes steam in their jackets. The table has no candles, no extra dishes, no ceremony beyond the quiet acknowledgement of what the day is. And yet there is something nourishing about it that goes beyond the food. The restraint of the Friday table was part of what made Sunday's feast taste the way it did. Simnel cake, a rich fruit cake covered in marzipan, traditionally decorated with 11 marzipan balls, representing the apostles, Judas absent, was associated with Easter in Britain broadly, and appeared on Scottish tables too, though it was and remains more strongly associated with England. In Scotland it was more likely to appear in households with English connections, or in communities where the Anglican tradition had more influence, but it was known, and a slice of simnel cake with its sweet almond paste and dense fruity interior was a worthy end to an Easter Sunday meal. What was most distinctly Scottish about the Easter feast was less any single dish, and more the quality of the table itself. This was a communal occasion. In the close-knit communities of the Highlands and the Islands, Easter Sunday meant neighbours visiting, gifts of food exchanged between households, a general opening of doors that had been shut tight against winter. The kitchen on Easter Sunday morning was full of warmth and smell, peat smoke and baking, butter melting, eggs in a pot on the range, perhaps a pot of crowdie cooling in the dairy, the smell of good lamb being cooked. After the cold discipline of winter and Lent, all of it was extraordinary. The poet in the folk tradition did not have the words for the smell of the first proper feast of spring, but the body knew it, the unlocking of appetite after restraint, the permission to be generous, to eat with pleasure, to sit at the table and feel that the year had turned in your favour. Rather than speaking of Scotland all in one breath, let us visit 3 corners of it. each different, each shaped by its own landscape and history. 3 small windows into what Easter morning looked and felt like in different parts of the same country. First, let us travel to the Outer Hebrides. It is early morning on the island of South Uist, which remained Catholic through the Reformation and after, a fact that gave its Easter a different character from that of the Presbyterian mainland. The sky is just beginning to lighten over the sea to the east, a slow grey brightening that spreads across the water. The air smells of salt and the particular green sharpness of macher grass, that low, flat coastal grassland, studded with wild flowers in summer, but still winter spare in early April. In the houses, fires have been lit early. The women have been up since before 4. This is Easter Sunday, the greatest feast of the year. Not just the greatest, but the most desired, the most longed for, the one that makes all the dark months worth bearing. In the church, small, whitewashed, candlelit, there has been an Easter Vigil during the night, the blessing of a new fire, the exultate sung in the dark, the slow brightening of candlelight through the building as the Paschal candle's flame was passed from wick to wick. The community has been awake together through the sacred hours, and now, in the grey dawn, they walk home across the macher, carrying lit candles cupped in their hands against the wind, and the pale wax light flickers against the sea-grey sky, and everything smells of spring. The Easter breakfast on a Hebridean table was gathered from what the island gave: eggs, the first real abundance of them, fresh bread, perhaps a piece of smoked fish, perhaps a little lamb, if the family had it, and crowdy, that soft white cheese, in a bowl on the table. The children ate quickly, eyes bright with anticipation. After breakfast came the paiss eggs, and after the paiss eggs came the rolling on the macher slope above the shore. Now let us travel inland to Perthshire. Here the landscape is different, dramatic, forested, cut through with rivers, a farming community in the hills above the Tay. The people here are Presbyterian, and their relationship with Easter is more complicated than their Catholic neighbours to the west. The Kirk does not formally mark it with special ceremony, but the eggs are there, the paiss-brae is there, the children are there, with their grandmother's tradition in their hands and in their arms, in the muscle memory of how you wrap the onion skins around the egg before boiling. The eggs were dyed the day before, Holy Saturday evening, while the last of the daylight held. The whole household gathered round the kitchen table. The onion skins had been saved in a bowl beside the range for weeks. Gorse, picked that morning from the hillside above the farm, sat in a bundle on the windowsill. its coconut smell filling the kitchen. Each egg was wrapped carefully, the skins layered over the shell, a leaf or a sprig of gorse pressed against it, the whole thing bound tight with thread. Then the pot went on the range, and the waiting began. When the eggs came out, unwrapped at the table, each one a small reveal, the colours were extraordinary, gold and amber and russet, some plain, some with the ghost of a leaf pressed into the surface, a faint veined pattern in a paler tone against the background. On Easter morning after church, the family walks up the paiss-braes above the village. It is a proper spring morning, cold, bright, with a wind coming off the hills that makes your eyes water, and the sky a washed blue, and the sound of a curlew somewhere above. Other families are already there. Children are negotiating, comparing eggs, selecting their champion. The hill fills with voices. The eggs go down one by one. They roll and bounce and veer and come to rest. And the one that has gone furthest, still whole, still warm from its pocket, is held up with genuine pride. Then they are eaten there on the hillside, cold from the morning air, and firm boiled and dipped in salt, brought in a small paper twist. And the taste of it, the egg eaten out of doors on an Easter morning, with the hills around you and the river shining in the valley below, is something you never entirely forget. After the rolling, the dumping, two children face each other, each holding a paiss egg, fist clenched, pointed up. They tap the ends together, one shell cracks, the loser surrenders their egg, the winner moves on to the next challenger, egg held high, and the game continues until one egg alone remains unbroken. It is carried home with ceremony. It may sit on the kitchen shelf until next Easter, a little monument to this year's paiss-brae. And finally, let us go to the sea, a fishing village on the Firth of Forth, on the east coast of Scotland. Here, Easter has a particular significance, because Easter and the fishing season are bound together. The boats that have been laid up or worked only cautiously through the worst of winter are now being prepared in earnest. The herring season approaches. The nets are being checked and mended. The boats are being caulked and painted. And on Easter Sunday morning, in the tradition of these coastal communities, the boats in the harbour are blessed. The fishermen of Scotland were famously superstitious, richly, elaborately superstitious, with a complex code of things that could and could not be said or done near the boats. Certain words were forbidden aboard. Certain animals could not be mentioned. Certain people encountered on the way to the harbour were ill omens. Easter, as a major turning point in the seasonal calendar, would have carried its own significance in communities like this. The blessing of boats and nets at seasonal transitions was deeply embedded in Scottish coastal life, and it seems wholly in keeping with what we know of these communities, that Easter, the hinge between the dark months and the sea-going season, would have been a time for prayers over the water. The boat sat low in the harbour water, smelling of tar and salt. Whether the minister came down to the shore, or whether the blessing was spoken quietly by the oldest man among the fishermen, in words that mix scripture with something older and more salt-cured, either way, the gesture carried the same meaning, an acknowledgement that what lay beyond the harbour mouth was perilous, and that you needed more than seamanship to navigate it. And then the preparations continued, and the season began. The fire has burned very low now. The embers glow a deep rose gold, and the room around you is warm, and outside the window there is a silence that feels like the particular silence of early spring, not the dead silence of winter, but a silence full of held breath, of things about to begin. We have journeyed tonight through the Easter of old Scotland. We have stood with a congregation on Arthur's Seat in the cold Edinburgh dark, waiting for the sun. We have sat in the grey Hebridean dawn after the Easter Vigil, carrying new flame home across the macher. We have learned how to dye an egg with onion skins gathered from a winter's cooking, and gorse picked from the spring hillside. We have rolled it down a paiss-brae in Perthshire and tapped it against a neighbour's egg in the dumping game, and carried the unbroken victor home with proper ceremony. We have watched children go door to door with their Easter rhymes. We have sat at the Good Friday table over salt herring and plain potatoes, and then at the Sunday table, the first real feast after the long quiet of winter, and eaten with the particular pleasure of things tasted after restraint. What strikes me, sitting here by the dying fire, is how thoroughly Easter in old Scotland was a whole-body celebration, not confined to the church, though the church was central to it, not confined to any single custom, though the customs were beloved and specific. It involved the landscape, the hills to climb, the paiss-braes to roll eggs down. It involved the sky, the vigil fire kindled, the sunrise waited for, the new light welcomed home. It involved the kitchen, the onion skins, the gorse flowers, the smell of baking and the warmth of the range. It involved the street and the doorstep, the children with their Easter rhymes, the paiss eggs moving from house to house, like small, warm ambassadors of the season. These people understood something that is easy to forget in a world of heating systems and supermarkets, that seasons are real and that the turning from one to the next is a genuine event in the life of the body and the spirit. Winter ends and spring begins, and that deserves to be marked, not merely noted. The egg on the table, the face lifted to the new morning light, the vigil candle carried home across the cold macher. These were not superstitions, they were responses to the world behaving as it should, the light returning, the cold relenting, the earth remembering how to be warm. And they were, above everything, communal. The egg-rolling hills were full of people. The Easter table was shared. The vigil was kept together. These customs knitted communities in the acknowledgement of something larger than any individual life, the turning of the year, the return of abundance, the stubborn, luminous fact of spring. Let the fire settle a little more now. Let the warmth of it rest on your face. Somewhere out there, if it is spring where you are, there is gorse on some hillside, blazing yellow. There is a hilltop that catches the first light of morning before anything else does. There is, somewhere, a kitchen table being laid for the first real feast of the season. You have carried the story with you through the night. Set it down gently now, like a bright egg placed carefully in the grass. Sleep well. The morning is coming. And if this journey has brought you comfort or wonder, if these old customs and these old stories have been good company through the dark, then do please like this episode and subscribe to Caledonia Sleeps so that the fireside stories can find you again, whatever the season. Good night from the fireside. Good night from Scotland. Good night.